Welcome everybody, for the recording especially. Drupal and the music industry, learning from our success. So since that's been up on the screen, you obviously are in the right place. And like he said, feel free to leave, partway through if it seems a little boring or not your kind of thing. It won't be though. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have fun, I hope. Because this is a slightly different topic. And I will start off by saying a little bit about myself to kind of frame what I'm going to say later. So I don't have this mirrored on my screen, and I realize that's going to be weird. I'm going to be doing this the whole time. Anyway, my name is Matthew Tift. I am a Drupal developer. I've been involved with this local Drupal community for quite a while. I've been an organizer since the very first Drupal camp, Twin Cities, however many years ago that was. In my previous professional life, I was a musicologist. I taught music down at the University of Iowa, and I have lately, my current life, I've been doing a lot of something called live coding, which I was kind of messing around with earlier when you walked in. There were the weird beat stuff going on. But lots of the things that I've done in my life have been around coding or have been around music. And this talk is one way to explore some of those connections between these two areas that I've been interested in. So I work at Lullaby. And in my day job, I work at a place where we do design, strategy. What do we do? We do strategy, design, and Drupal development for large-scale publishers. So we actually work with a fair number of large music organizations, and some of what I'm talking about today is part of the history of Lullaby. But this way of talking about Drupal is slightly different from how I've talked about it in the past. I've written about how we talk about Drupal, how we think about Drupal. I've written about growing the Drupal community and the kinds of things that we can do to make the community feel more inclusive and welcoming to people. I've looked at different models for how people have tried to make money with Drupal modules and why historically that hasn't worked out so well. And I've also looked quite a bit at sponsorship data. I have done some research with Dries Boytart, the project lead and founder of Drupal, where we've looked at commit credit data to understand who is funding the people that are developing Drupal. So for those of you who might not know, every time you commit code to Drupal, you can say, for example, I could say something like, I am Matthew Tift, and I'm committing this code, and I work at Lullaby, and I'm doing that on behalf of my client, the Grammys or the Recording Academy or something like that. So every time people commit code to Drupal now, they can acknowledge where that money is coming from. Or you can just say I'm a volunteer, or you could do it anonymously or whatever. But we actually have a lot of data about how people are contributing to Drupal. And so we can actually find out, how the music industry is represented, and I'll get back to that some more. But today, it's a different way to just kind of slice up the community. So this is not a technical session. This is a session where we're talking about how the Drupal community has, I guess, fairly successfully, I would say, found success in this one particular area, being music. And to borrow a phrase from music theory, this talk today then will be sort of an ABA kind of form. So just so you guys know what to expect, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the background, and then I'm going to show you a whole bunch of Drupal websites and offer up some interpretations of what those websites might mean for us. But when I was trying to decide how to give this talk, this I selected these two particular categories for trying, picking a track. And business and community are I think, two ways that we could use this information. One, to understand where we've been successful, and then maybe figure out if there's any lessons that we could learn from this in our future business endeavors. And based on the question I asked before we started, I know most of you do Drupal for your business. But we can also use this information to kind of understand the Drupal community, or guess at how all of us are involved and why we're involved and what sort of motivates us. So this starts, I guess, in a way, going back to Dries Boytart, again, the Drupal project founder. He occasionally blogs. And he actually blogs pretty regularly now again. But he's really, over the years, been forthcoming with what he's thinking about. And over the years, he's also sort of highlighted Drupal websites. So he'll have these posts where he says, Beyonce is using Drupal, or Pink is using Drupal, or Universal Music is using Drupal. And kind of highlighting, what these big websites are that are using Drupal. And not always big websites, but in these cases, I guess, those are names that a lot of people recognize. And in fact, from 2006 to 2009, Dries published 27 blog posts. You can see these if you go to Dries/tag/music. And these are all ones tagged with music. And they all have titles like Ozzy Osbourne is using Drupal, and the Royal Flemish Philharmonic is using Drupal. So he has done his part to sort of highlight this. And this is kind of an arbitrary thing, Dries's blog. We don't have to interpret this as the truth or something like that, but it does show us sort of a trail, a historical evidence, if you want, that would say, at these points, these websites were launched with Drupal. So I kind of noticed that over the years. And I should mention, too, the first one that he did was MTV using Drupal back in 2006. So we're talking 12 years ago. And to give a little context of that, back then we were at Drupal 4.3, and this is what Drupal.org looked like. And it's quite a bit different from today, as we'll see. But that first post in 2006, the last time he did one of these posts, or the most recent, I guess I could say, doesn't mean he's never going to do a post like that, was in 2009. And this is also interesting to me. If you look at Drupal.org from that same time period, that it looks almost exactly the same. So this was a different period in Drupal's history, but this was also sort of a real developmental period when we had a lot of these big music contracts. So I thought it was interesting in this in this period, you'd have, like, on the front page of Drupal, like a blog where all kinds of people would just sort of randomly post things. So the Drupal that we know today, if you've been to DrupalCon, or if you have visited Drupal.org recently, has a different kind of focus. And I'll get to that as well. But we also have quite a few music sites that Dries never did blog about. So I went around the web, I guess you could say, looking for various Drupal sites, and I should first talk about this slide, because this is Drupal.org today. And today we have this new, this is a fairly recent development where we're focusing on these three different sort of personas, I guess is the marketing term, three different types of people that would come and use Drupal. And we have developers, we have marketers, and we have agencies. And if you click on the marketers section down here, within that, the way we sort of, I will say, construct a Drupal, the way we understand it, the way we sell it, is that we focus on these 5 different areas. So media and publishing being one of them. So then music would be this one slice of that. So this does fit now, I guess, with our current approach to here are the places where Drupal is successful. And this could be all kinds of different categories, but somebody had to choose these 5. So is this true then? If we say media and publishing, how many? What might we say about the music sites? So I have this little tool in my browser called Wappalizer, I think is how you pronounce that, and it puts a little Drupal symbol on Drupal sites. So if I go to ladygaga.com, I can see the little Drupal. And if I go to the Grateful Dead, there's a little DrupalCon. And the Beatles, and Eric Clapton, and Led Zeppelin, and Bruno Mars, and Cardi B. And some of these people, I like ask my daughters, who should I put on this list? There's so many music artists out there. I was like, oh, the Grateful Dead, or ooh, Green Day, that sort of, maybe I'm dating myself. Sinatra, that's awesome, like, wow. I don't know much about Ed Sheeran, or Bad Barbie, Bad Baby, sorry. But I know Tom Petty. But anyway, so there's just a whole lot of musicians using Drupal. And again, maybe this seems kind of random, but there's also a reason for that. A lot of those musicians are part of labels that use Drupal. And if you look at the different labels like Atlantic Records and Nonsuch and Rhino and Warner Music, and again, the list just kind of goes on and on. A lot of these are part of Warner Music Group's family of labels. But as you'll see, there's even more. There's all kinds of music labels using Drupal. So, but then I thought, okay, well, the music world, we can look at that in other ways too. So we know, again, that Drupal focuses on these 5 areas, including higher education, so it makes sense then if you'd go to music departments like Stanford, the music department, or Yale, or Duke, or Brown University, or University of Chicago, or Ohio State. Again, the list just goes on and on. All of these music departments using Drupal. Arizona State University, right here in Minnesota, the University of Minnesota School of Music. You could go across the pond and find the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and or a whole music school, Berklee School of Music. And then you can go on and look at various music organizations. So, we have MTV, we have the National Association of Music Foundation, or Music Merchants, the NAMM Foundation, classicalmusic.com. If you want to make a score with music, and you don't want to use the paid versions like Finale or Sibelius, one of the most popular music scores is MuseScore. I actually interviewed these guys one time on Hacking Culture, my podcast. I don't know if I even mentioned that, but I have stickers too. Hacking Culture stickers, Lullaby stickers, Free Software Foundation stickers. So anyway, on Hacking Culture, the podcast I do on free software. But anyway, MuseScore, they use Drupal as well. But and you can really just like looking all around at these different categories. At Grand Ole Opry, I worked in Wisconsin Public Radio for 8 years, and public radio. At Wisconsin Public Radio, one of our stations was a classical music station, and we used Drupal there. That's how I got my start with Drupal. But I went to a lot of public media conferences, and I was very involved in that world, obviously, for 8 years. And I'll tell you, Drupal is all over the place. So in the classical music world, in the public media world, Drupal all over the place. And then, on the music industry's biggest night, Grammy Grammy.com, they're using Drupal. So, whoa, that's a lot of websites, right? What does that mean though? And that was kind of the challenge to myself for this recent area of exploration, is trying to figure out if this means anything. Because I fully admit it might not mean anything other than now you have a list of really cool people that use Drupal that you can use to sell your clients. Or if you meet somebody at a party and you want to tell them what Drupal is, and you can be like, yeah, Beyonce, she uses Drupal and so do I, so now we're basically like buds. But you do have to wonder if any of those recording artists actually even know that they are using Drupal. But so that's one thing, is we could just say that there are a lot of organizations that are using Drupal because it's good for business. That it is, when they look around at their competitors and they're reading their business newspaper, and let's say you're in the music industry and you see, oh, what's this person doing? What's this company doing? Oh, they're using Drupal. Oh, maybe I should too. So there is this sense that you could use Drupal and then not particularly care about any of the philosophy behind it, or even care all that much about like the technology or the community, but it's purely like a business decision that I can sell Drupal to my boss because I can show them this cool list of websites and say, well, they're all using it, so we should too, boss. Or I could find you could find all kinds of quotes from music industry folks like Kevin Colligan, who said, when the Grammys decided to change to the Drupal platform, I wanted to make sure we got the best in the business to build our flagship Grammy.com. 100 million page views later, it's clear we made the right choice. So he is saying that, yes, the Drupal, it works for us from a business sort of practical standpoint. So that's one way we could understand this, and that perhaps is the most obvious way. Another way is that we could look at this in a sense that when people have tried Drupal, we can see not just that they're using it, but it has a positive effect on their business. So it's not simply enough to say, I'm using Drupal, I'm in the music industry, and I'm looking at my competitors, but actually does it have a net result? So with that Grammy quote, we can say that it's not just that they're using it, that others are using it, but that it also actually works, that it has a good positive effect, that if you want to share your content on the web, that Drupal is a good platform for that. So there's this sense that we can standardize. An enormous organization like Warner Brothers, or a label that has to manage all of these different artists and have all of these websites. Anytime that you have lots of content to manage and lots of websites, a lot of you know that this is better if we can standardize. So it seems that there is some sense of standardization in the industry, just like we could say the same thing about higher education or nonprofits, NGOs, or the government, even the other categories that we see on Drupal.org. So that sense of standardization is another thing that we can use when we're talking about why people would use Drupal. That it's just, it's not just that free software is good. Maybe I'm at it from a philosophical point because I'm a strong advocate for open source and free software, but it's also that when we do things together and we standardize, that it's successful. So that requires then a sense of cooperation and a lot of people to work together. And when we can see evidence of this too in the past. One of the more successful collaborations in the Drupal community has been when Sony Music sponsored some key improvements to our multilingual system. Now, this particular post was a summary of, it's like a case study of what Sony Music did. It's a long post from 2009 by Nedjo Rogers, but the key thing here is that Sony was looking for a way to be able to create websites for all of their musicians and then have those available in lots of different languages all around the world. And they chose Drupal, and they decided not just that Drupal was a good choice and not just that they were going to build the website for themselves and add this functionality, but that they were going to work with the Drupal community and get these changes available so they would work well in Drupal core. In other words, what I'm starting to get at here is it's not simply just that lots of people are doing this or it's good and it has this positive effect on business, but also that there's this sense that we could share. So when this happened, there were a number of interesting comments on that thread and elsewhere around this time. For example, this one says, "What a wonderful exposition on the symbiosis of large corporate development coupled with an active open source community." So here we have somebody putting a positive spin on this collaboration, saying, this is great. We have open source people that want to do something, and we have this corporation that wants to fund that. And don't we all want to be able to do things the right way? And other people said similar statements. This comment on that post said, "The large corporation gains a fantastic platform to promote their artists. The Drupal community gains from the attention of serious developers dedicated to releasing awesome code." The word "serious developers" here sort of stuck out to me, because this sort of suggests that in this person's understanding that we went from having people that were just kind of toying around with Drupal, this Drupal thing, to serious developers. We have people that they're not just doing it for a playful reason. And also this notion that now that we have the corporate support, now we can create awesome code. And don't we all like to be in situations where we have the option, the time, the funding, whatever it is, to write that awesome code? And Nedjo had a number of lessons learned from this particular collaboration, and the first one was engage with the community, because this effort to do this required not just one agency working with one company. This was a real broad community effort with lots of agencies involved, lots of people getting funded individually, people for Sony, various people stepping forward to do their part. And you could say to get their chunk of the pie of the money from Sony. But the point is, this type of thing, these type of broad changes like adding internationalization to Drupal core doesn't often happen without a lot of people cooperating together. So Sony did something that we'd like maybe a lot of our clients to do, which is to not just build stuff for themselves, but to engage with the community. So that's something we can learn from this particular piece of Drupal in the music industry. And not just the community of people, but also we're talking about the code here. So working with Drupal core, not against it. I mean, how many people in this room have been involved in projects where you had to hack core? Okay. How many people have been involved in these projects where you are building functionality to extend core for your client, and then it never sees the light of day. It's just for that client, right? So this is something that happens a lot. A lot of people from the Drupal community saw this and said, "Way to go, Sony! You have helped us contribute back to Drupal core code." So again, you can go back, and there's all kinds of blog posts and articles and podcasts. There's some Lullaby podcasts where we interviewed some of the people from Sony, and you can hear these people talking about how, yeah, we thought the Drupal community is great. We wanted to give back, and we thought that this was the best thing that we could do for our business, and it's something kind of neat about that. But again, it's not just adding. It's also fixing problems. We have all kinds of bugs in our code. So being aware that it's kind of a different mindset to say, I want to build this thing and I need this and I'm going to build something totally new, but also being aware that you have to kind of fix things along the way if you want to make them work with the community, work with broader functionality. And then this particular line I highlighted. There were other lessons, but this one, developers like to get to do it right. And again, I know I'm speaking to lots of people here who are doing Drupal as a business, and don't we know this too, that it's just nice when we have the time, the money, the funding to do it right. So the music business in this particular Sony instance, they seem to get it. And the Drupal community seemed to respond positively. Now I've looked for other examples like this. I went through that commit credit data that I was talking about earlier to see, all right, well, what's happened recently? Do we have any other big initiatives that I could throw up on the board here? More pictures of DrupalCons and whatever. But this was about the only project I could find. This one, supporting organization is Universal Music Group, but it's a sandbox project, and it's from 2015. So I searched through all the commit credit data, trying to find some way to find evidence of people, the music industry, or specifically labels or other music organizations contributing in the same way, and I couldn't. So there's something that's actually kind of special about this Sony case, and it hasn't happened as much before. So maybe we learned a lot of those lessons, but I also have wondered, well, did we really learn? Is this just like a fluke? Is this whole focusing on music thing useful at all? Is it just here's some random cases of success? And I'm not sure. So, that's a great slide. The other, obvious interpretation of finding all of these music-themed websites is that music is content, and we do content management, so duh. There would be a lot of Drupal sites, and there's probably other content management systems that can do this as well. Most of the web doesn't need probably the complexity that Drupal can often offer, the internationalization, the handling audio on the web. Handling audio on the web in 2006 was very different than it is today. That was not something that we did nearly as much. So some of these earlier cases were actually quite a big deal. But in a way, these early experiments and collaborations with the music industry led to the blossoming or the growing, the adoption of Drupal because of the way it was allowed to do this specific thing of managing content. So keeping that in mind too is something that, again, this might seem like duh, but when we're looking at like what projects make sense for Drupal, do you have a lot of content? And that is going against what some other ways of understanding Drupal that say, Drupal is for everyone. I've made that case too, that we really should, like, everybody should use Drupal. Why not? It works great for big organizations, but also works for little organizations. But as we know, not everyone has a lot of content for their website. So keeping that in mind is another lesson, shall we call it? I don't know if that's the right word. So Dries has certainly pushed this as well. More recently, in June 2016, he did his first blog post where he mentioned this phrase, ambitious digital experiences. He talked about it again in his keynote last year. We were in Baltimore, DrupalCon, and he's talked about it at other Drupal events where he is constructing Drupal. He is presenting this idea of Drupal as a tool for ambitious digital experiences, which is now right on the front page of Drupal.org. First sentence, the leading open source CMS for ambitious digital experiences. So, what we might learn from this too is that when Dries makes statements like this, we could say that he's not necessarily saying this is what Drupal wants to be, but that this is what Drupal is. This is what Drupal does well. So frequently, when we're using Drupal, we're focused on making Drupal something else. We want this to be something else in the future, but there's these other times which I think are kind of fascinating. We're saying, well, this is what Drupal is right now, and we know this right now because I just showed you a whole bunch of websites that. I don't know how ambitious like LadyGaga.com is or something like that, but I do know that managing hundreds of artists' websites is a pretty ambitious kind of thing, and Drupal does that well, so it's sort of reflecting reality and good for business. So I do think there's like a whole other level of what was going on with this adoption of with music that we could sort of differentiate from some of the other areas where Drupal has succeeded. And I think for a lot of us, okay, I'm going to say something crazy. A lot of people listen to music, and a lot of people have this like personal relationship with music. I've met people that listen to it in the car, or when they're running, or when they're at home, or at parties. It's like, it's everywhere. And okay, that's kind of ridiculous, but there is something maybe special about the music that appeals to us as people. And you can look around Drupal. It's pretty easy to find people in the Drupal community that are or were musicians, like Robert Douglas or Jam, or the co-founder of Lullaby, where I work, named Jeff Robbins, was in a band, Orbit. And there's this sense that it wasn't just that Drupal was a good fit for music, but like Jeff was in a band that played at Lollapalooza here in the 90s, and he was part of the music industry, and they had a record contract, and the people that he knew in the music industry was part of the reason that Lullaby had some early successes with Drupal. One of the first Dries' first blog post about MTV, Lullaby was involved in that project. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that a music organization looking at this new thing, Drupal, happened to work with an organization that was founded by a musician. I mean, I think that people come together around music. Some of those various activities I mentioned before. And so then there's this sense that we can kind of belong to something bigger. So, we can say it's just good business, but it's kind of cool when you can be like, yeah, I know there are people in the Twin Cities area that are like, oh yeah, I worked on Justin Bieber's website. And I know 10-7 right now is working on, they're working with another label. And there's people I've been talking to in the community that are that seem to, get kind of excited about, hey, it's kind of fun working with, a label like that. And so I even would push it a little bit further. So for 20 years now, my research and understanding of music has been pretty influenced by this guy named Christopher Small. I've given a lot of talks at various cultural studies and women's studies and music conferences that have had musicking in the title or in my descriptions. But Christopher Small suggests that we look at music not as a thing, but as an activity. So, if we look at it like that, then we can say that it's not just about the performer on the stage, but a musical performance is about all the people that were involved in making that happen, and that it's this effort that happens with when people come together. That it's not just the singer, it's not just the composer, it's not just the audience, it's even like the people who are cleaning up and setting up afterwards. And we all kind of intuitively know that we can go to a music conference or concert or be involved in these other musical activities, and we like to kind of belong together. We like to do stuff together. And I think there's a good fit there with how we like to write code and how we like to build websites, that it's not just like, oh, I made it, it's done. I made this thing. It's this process. And so I think that this notion of musicking is helpful because we like coding, we like marketing, we like working with people, we like pushing things forward, we like creating new technologies, we like adding decoupled front ends because we like adding decoupled front ends, and we have all of these new things that we just keep, we keep sort of exploring. And I think that there is something that kind of fits well with that. Like, I don't know if it's the same. Maybe you could make the case that it's the same with the hospital. Maybe you could make the case that it's the same with, the government. They're always pushing forward. But something about maybe the music industry seems to just fit well with developers. I don't know. Our community likes to get together, and I've been involved with it for a while. But I certainly know a lot of the Drupal events where I've been. People pull out guitars. There's a whole list. I should have put this up there. There's a whole list of Drupal songs that you can find on Drupal.org. Both things that people have recorded as well as scores and that kind of thing. But I don't know if that's a reason why people would sort of say, "Ooh, this is fun to work with." But I think there's that sense of being connected with an industry that has done such a good job of making us desire more and more music and albums and streaming and all the things that we desire, so that we can work together at work and do fun stuff. Actually, two of our core values that Lullaby likes to repeat, that we think of often. We have a lot of core values. I think there's 7 of them, but a lot of times people will remember have fun and kick ass. And that's how we that's how we at Lullaby like to build things. We want to work with people if we can have fun and kick ass. So we don't want to just necessarily do boring. And so I think with some of these projects, especially early on Lullaby stuff, we could this was it. Maybe music is kind of fun. Maybe there's something about that. And I say this too, hoping that maybe it sparks something in your minds too about what kind of projects would be good for my company? What kind of things do I want to work on? What might I take from this? Why did so many agencies and organizations get involved and put money into this and that kind of thing? And maybe there's something there. I don't know. It's a different way of understanding teamwork and collaboration. And I can take another step forward, or another take. I shouldn't say a step forward. These are what I'm offering here is different sort of interpretations as to why we got to the situation where we have all these music sites. But if you ask some of the people that were involved, one of my colleagues at Lullaby was involved in that very first MTV project. I was talking to him last night about it. And he was saying that he felt like Robin Hood. That was the most closest thing I could find to Robin Hood that was like a Creative Commons license image, but he thought it was so cool that he was working on this site that the big, some people might add evil, music label was giving him money to work on something that he could share with other people. So he's mentioned that to me a number of times over the years, and that's actually, I think when he's mentioned that over the years to me, that has been something that has stuck with me, this idea of Robin Hood, this idea of I love working on stuff when I can get paid, and I'm getting paid to do something that's fun, and I'm getting paid to give something, to make something that I'm giving away. Like, that is motivating. That's fun. And he remembers it very, clearly that's part of the reason that he got involved in Drupal development. And he's not the only one. A lot of people that I've talked to feel that way. And it's not just music, too. I need to be clear about that these just happen to be some of the early successes, but that is continued, that we continue to have success in these industries once we start to kind of standardize. So if nothing else, too, if you haven't visited that page on Drupal.org, it's probably good for your businesses to keep in mind of these organizations and areas where we do well. Because you can learn from history to find success going forward. So we could get, I think there's all kinds of academic interpretations of this, but I think for me what it comes down to is we can have a lot of success without complicating things, and we can merely say, I'm thinking about doing this project, this Drupal project, and is it good for me? Like, is it fun? Is it fulfilling? Is it going to be exciting? Am I going to learn something? And is it good for others? Can I share my code? Is this site I'm building going to excite people? Is this something that's neat? Something I'm going to want to talk about at the the party after sessions today? And I think keeping those kinds of questions in mind, and as well as these areas where we've had success, I think we can say yes to both of those questions, which I don't have phrased as questions, but is it good for me? Is it good for others? So I don't think there's necessarily a reason to complicate this too much. And when we look at these other areas where we've found success in the Drupal industry, I think music is, maybe it's different, maybe it's not. I'm not totally sure, but I do know that I would go one step forward too. I keep saying forward. I don't know where that's coming from. Maybe it's just I'm advancing the slides and it's making me think forward. But that we can say, like other people did, like even sometimes corporations get a bad rap, and I've certainly written some articles and suggested ideas about corporate influence in free software and open source cultures, but there is this sense that it can be good to when we're looking for partners to not prejudge these potential clients, these potential agencies that we're working with, that that if we're really coming from a sense of like being nice, not saying, there are other comments that I didn't share, maybe those would have been helpful, but people saying that, oh man, Drupal, now we've sold out, now that we've got Sony Music, or now that we've got Warner, or now that we have X, now it means it's not just for fun anymore. And there's some truth to that, but there's also a sense that we can do these fun things and get paid, and that's cool too. That it's cool to fund my kids' 529 plans and walk them out to the bus stop every day because I have a job that I can work at home. Like, that's pretty cool for me, and I like that. And as long as I'm not prejudging a lot of the clients I'm working with, my colleagues, the people I meet at these conferences. I think it's useful, and I think this is one of those cases where the Drupal community has kind of said, well, yeah, we'll work with you, of course. Like that's fun, that's cool. And there's a word in Pali. It's kind of like Sanskrit, or I think it might be the same word in Sanskrit called metta, but it's kindness. It stands for kindness or friendliness or that kind of thing, and that's maybe me adding more interpretation, but it's me encouraging people to continue to work together, because we have a unique thing in the Drupal community. I know it's not just Lullaby, and a lot of agencies work together. I just thought of a good example. We have these Pantheon guys here, and like at we used to have all kinds of competing parties at DrupalCons each year. But then Lullaby and Pantheon got together. In the past few years, we've hosted parties together because we thought, well, why have parties where we're competing? Why not get together? Or if we're working on a project, well, hey, you guys are building this thing and we're building this thing, and let's do that together. So I think a lot of that mentality comes back from some of these early successes in the music industries where we got used to working with other agencies. Lullaby regularly borrows other developers when we need more developers, or they borrow Lullabots when we have these. Some people use the word like friend-petitors or something like friend-petitor. I can't remember. Cooperation, yeah, good words like that. But I'm up here sort of advocating too that we continue that, because then when we work together, we can build these big cool things, and that could be fun. So I don't know if I'm just like reading tea leaves or making up stuff here, but it's been fun for me to look at like all these success stories that Drupal has had and try and understand them. And I would like to now, if you guys have any other comments, to hear your interpretations of this, or any other comments that you guys might have about this area of Drupal. So I'll stop talking and open it up for questions.
Well, Matt, for what you're talking about for sharing resources and people, I think the biggest picture, it sounds like you guys are on that track, is that it's not just that our 8 individual agencies win, but that Drupal wins, and that we provide the kind of support that the world is looking for. So they're not saying, oh, well, this agency can't handle it because they don't have the bandwidth to do it. What about this group that's pushing a WordPress system or something like that? So to see that the individual cooperation helps us push forward Drupal as a solid platform that will last for a long time is probably the most useful thing out of those collaborations.
Yeah.
Keep it going. Thanks.
Thank you.
I was curious too, do you see things about losing sites? Like, is that on your mind? Of, say, the whitehouse.gov switches over to WordPress. Do you follow those pretty closely too? To see what did we miss? What could we do differently in a future situation so we don't lose this like high visibility client?
Yeah, I've had a number of discussions about that particular site, and there might be some political issues going on there. There's other sites that we could look at. Sony Music. They now have a WordPress site, so they've moved away. So there are these instances that I could talk about in the music industry where folks have moved away, and why that makes sense or why that doesn't make sense. I haven't spent as much time looking at who did this and now they don't, because that's a harder thing to track down. People don't say, oh, Drupal sucked because of this, and now I can go read a blog post. I might be able to interview someone on a podcast and say, oh yeah, why did you switch and what can we learn from that? But I haven't gotten to that point yet. That's certainly an interesting question to ask, is why people switch. But I mean, there's the part of me that just says people just like to keep switching things up. I know there's a certain case where, like, like with the Sony, that there was one person especially pushing that project, and there's people that like to use Drupal, and like even where I work at Lullaby, we've worked with people, and we've worked with them at an organization, and then they moved to another organization, and then they wanted to work with us and do more, so then they'd bring Drupal in. So there's this sense that people kind of know what they know, and then they bring that. So sometimes it's just a matter of a person leaving an organization, and then somebody else comes in, and then somebody else thinks they should standardize on something else that they're more familiar with. So a lot of times there's not much we can do about that, but there are plenty of instances where we probably could learn from, like, why did we lose that? And your question is a good one in that I don't really have much of a better answer for you than that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't think we need whitehouse.gov anymore because we have Justin Bieber. But yeah, even just some of the sites that you listed out, it's just kind of good to remember that there are, these fun sites or personalities built on Drupal. There are things that we know, and it's just it's really easy to lose sight of that stuff in the day-to-day, context of the real world. So
yeah,
I thought that was useful.
Yeah, I think it's important too to remember that people don't need like music or some other thing that makes them excited. A lot of people can get really excited about building a site for a company that makes widgets. If the company that makes the widget wants to do it right and wants to invest in the community and wants to, help core and fund developers and spend the time.
Yeah.
So I do think that's it's good to be reminded that there are lots of ways that people get excited, but
Whatever your own personal Justin Bieber might be.
Whatever that might be, right? So, maybe I'm biased because I have all these degrees in music that I'm just like, oh, that's cool. But maybe there are people that don't think music sites are that cool. I don't know who that would be, but anyway. Anyone else? All right. Thank you for coming.